All right. And we're live, maybe, hopefully, possibly. It never seems to be on the page I think I am, but good enough. So, Mark, great to catch up again. Well, I think we've spoken for it's probably been about a year or so, hasn't
Few
it?
months. Yeah.
God, it goes incredibly quickly. It's just insane. So, yeah, tell me what you've been up to. It sounds like you've been doing some quite interesting stuff.
Yeah, I spent quite a bit of time doing a lot of investigations into some of the things like AI and some of the ESG stuff. There's a good session put on by third one yesterday for the ESG and the
Hmm.
due diligence you need to do. That was put on by Saki, and I can't remember the other guy's name right now. It's gone from me. But there was some really good ones in that.
Yeah, so,
Um,
so I actually, unfortunately, I was speaking at another event at the time. So since I missed it, do you want to give me the quick 2 minutes on background? Because I got
well, I guess a lot of it, to me, a lot of it's common sense, because I guess from my background being, doing a lot of systems engineering and also product management, where I'm looking at the whole product life cycle,
mm,
from cradle all the way to the grave. He was talking about the fact that you need to actually spend a bit of time looking at those sorts of things, where you look at the inputs, you look at the users, you look at the outputs, um, and consider the whole value chain in terms of how it's being used, whether there's using child labour to manufacture it,
mm,
um, once the product is not used anymore, is it being um, recycled? Is it being thrown out into tip and landfill?
right.
What type of products? And how they have a plan. And he was also talking about the fact that you need to have done a bit of investigation and research into all these things, and you've got to be careful you're not greenwashing things by doing your due diligence to make sure that any product or company that you're looking at investing in or supporting is doing the right thing, because that is obviously a bit of a challenge at the moment.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's coming up a lot, and it sounds like this was sort of addressed, is that I'm seeing a lot of companies are getting so caught up in the minutiae of what they think they should be doing around the process that they're missing the reason why they set up the process in the first place. And I think ESG, probably more than anything else, is guilty of this because it's such a big amorphous kludge of different ideas, that there's a real danger that people are missing the point. So yeah, it sounds like they we're driving to focus on that, so that's good. Look, so if people have got questions for you, do you just want to just give us a two minutes on your background? I know you're based down in Melbourne.
Yeah, so I'm based in Melbourne, in Victoria, in Australia, and yeah, so an engineer by training, but has also spent a lot of time in product management and also uh, as a systems engineer, particularly a lot in biomedical and also in automotive products. And I've also spent a fair bit of time doing consulting in all sorts of industries, defence, mining, etc. So I guess.
You mentioned that you just before we went live, you mentioned that you'd been involved in a couple of interesting projects around building the bionic man.
Not quite the bionic man, but yes, one of them was an artificial heart for people that are suffering with severe heart disease. And there's people out there that basically they can't get out of bed, or they're living off a machine. And sometimes they can put in what's called a ventricular assist device, which is effectively a pump to help the heart pump. In other cases, that's just not enough, and they actually have to remove the heart and either use a machine or replace the heart. And in the case of the one that I was working on, we were looking at a complete artificial heart. So we built and designed a system, and both hardware and software, and we're working using it to keep cows alive for more than 100 days and sheep alive for more than 100 days. Been developed to suit basically not infants, but from children through to adults, and to be able to be used for long-term as well as short-term. Ideally, the idea, initial idea and the way it's going for the approvals is for it to be used as a temporary measure till someone can get a heart transplant, because there's often more recipients wanting one than there are transplants available.
Awesome.
But it is also possible that, depending on how it all goes in the clinical trials, it may end up becoming a permanent bionic heart, if you like. And yeah, the other one that I spent a bit of time on was bionic eye. So that's for people that are blind. And again, so both of those are currently going into clinical trials. So they were really interesting projects, really complex projects, lots of regulatory impacts, lots of safety impacts in terms of, in many cases they're being implanted into the body, or they're being interfaced into the body where they have, potential for infections. How do you control it, make it safe? An artificial heart fails, you die. You don't get the oxygen to the brain. So, how do you make it fault safe? Yeah. Control-Alt-Delete is not an option. Microsoft is not an option. But yes,
it's probably a good thing given what happened last week.
I was just going to say, I don't know how you were affected, but I tell you what, I could not believe the impact that it had over here. We were early in the chain in terms of the countries around the world that got updated automatically, and it hit the media, it hit the telcos, it hit so many things. It was a nightmare.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So my background was tech sort of 20 plus years ago in the early days of the internet. And those things used to happen quite regularly. And it seems like it's been a long time since there's been sort of a virus or something that has really had that global impact. That they do fortunately seem to be getting further and further apart, but yeah, crikey, it really is a reminder how interconnected everything is when it falls over.
Certainly is, and it's another reminder of one of those problems for me where somewhere along the line somebody hasn't done that level of due diligence on testing and integration before they release it live, or we've had these automated systems which have automatically updated these things without having that level of again, I'll call due diligence, or that filter of somebody saying, well, is this actually ready? Have we done the required level of testing? Is this going to cause a problem? It didn't take them long to fix it, but
no, but I mean the net value that was destroyed over that 24 hours is just incredible, isn't it?
It is.
So tell me a bit about your board journey and your Veblen journey, and kind of what you've sort of learned along the way, what's been surprising, what's been hard for you personally, because I think it's interesting to kind of hear that what worked and what hasn't.
Certainly for me, traditionally being a bit more of an engineer, introverted type person, it's been a little bit more of a challenge to get out there and, sell yourself. And that's probably still where I have room for improvement, let's say. When it comes to, Veblen, I got involved April last year, I believe it was. I learned a lot from the point of view of looking at it in a different way. I was looking at, I've been a shareholder since I was in my 20s, probably. And, I have hundreds of thousands of dollars of shares. I think, if I think about the Veblen journey, it was more about educating me a different way of thinking about it, and thinking more of if I'm the business, what do the shareholders, or in particular the investors, want to see? And I was thinking, I guess, more from a, I'm a small time retail investor rather than a big time corporate investor, where I'm looking at doing a lot more due diligence, where I'm expecting a lot more data. And so for me, there's been a bit of a learning there. Certainly the communication's been pretty key. I didn't appreciate just how much impact communicating with your stakeholders can have, rather than, I guess, the more traditional. Again, I suppose part of that is that engineering, more introverted background. Certainly learned a lot from yourself and Graham. I really enjoy going to his boardroom meetings. Awesome. Learned lots through him. Learned quite a bit through Martin as well, through some of his coaching sessions. I guess some of that's been more about, that self-reflection and thinking about things a bit different. Accountability, setting those goals and then going about to achieve them. Accountability board's been something that's been pretty good too. I think a lot of the accountability I've done in the past has been less formal, let's say. I might have an accountability with my boss, or I might have an accountability with my staff, but it hasn't had that level of, I guess, focus. But certainly, the strategic stuff, really learnt a lot. When the investment banker guy came and did a webinar with us, and was talking about, the sorts of things they look for and the sorts of things that I guess I hadn't thought about, the size and the volumes and some of the things that impact the size of how you go to get funding. So for me, that was a pretty important one as well, because obviously, if I'm working at a company as director and we're going to market to get funding and, we want $4 million, well, there's a certain market I should be targeting, not necessarily another market. So,
no, I mean, that I think is a big eye opener for a lot of people. And I think it's also, I think that the language, and I talk about this a lot, but the language, when everyone is defined as an investor, and then you realize, well, actually, there's a huge difference between an angel investor, a small retail investor, the head of a hedge fund, and yet they all get classified as investors. It's so as a board member, you really need to understand who's interested in your stock and who are you a good target for.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, and I can give you another example. Yesterday, I went to a seminar being put on by the Australian Superannuation Council. And they're a big investor, investing all around the world in fact, I think the number was $3.9 trillion Aussie dollars being invested worldwide, of which, in the order of 50% in local markets and the other 50% overseas or something. And you sort of go, wow, the size of that, and how do you manage that? And, there's some real eye-opening discussions.
In Warren Buffett's book, The Snowball, or the biography of Warren Buffett, and he talks about one of the biggest problems that he has is he has to put $100 million a week to work. Like that's his responsibility to shareholders, is he has to deploy $100 million a week. And you kind of, like, on the one hand, there's millions of entrepreneurs out there going, yep, I'll help. But it doesn't work. Like, there's not that many companies that can absorb 100 million in an intelligent way, and with the liquidity that he can then get out again, should he need to. And it's that was kind of one of those eye-opening statements for me. I was like, oh my God, it's probably a nice problem to have, but it's still a problem to
it
have.
Is. It's at other end of the scale, I guess. And, the likes of, well, I don't know about yourself, but certainly myself, I'm not in that league, $100 million.
No,
that's a large company to me, not just an investment.
yeah. But I think it's interesting that the guys that do the national funds, whether it's just, each country has their own national funds, and they're making investment decisions. It's not just like you and I making investment decisions. We want it to go up, but we don't have the entire country watching us closely and making judgment calls on our judgment calls.
That's
It's a
true.
different game.
Then I guess also when you're investing $100 million, though, you've also got a team that are working for you. So you've got much more, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, I guess manpower, but that's not necessarily what I meant. Resource available to do the due diligence than what you or I may do typically. I mean,
True. I think there's sort of a level of due diligence you can do, and then beyond that, you're still like you're playing odds ultimately, and
yes.
I think that the interesting thing is if you take this right back to probably some of the boards you've been talking to and the early stage businesses that are looking to raise money, by definition, those entrepreneurs are quite bold. They're risk takers. They see the big vision. They see the big opportunity. And consequently, they're looking for investors like them. And then if you go and put yourself in front of a family office, the family office basically has a mandate to not lose money. That's in rule number 1, 2, and 3. And so when an entrepreneur or as a director of a company, if you get in front of that family office and you start saying, well, look at the opportunity, we can do this and we can do and it's all about this, you're painting the vision. What they want to know is that their money is going to be safe. The upside is nice, but it's not important. We actually nearly bought a family office recently that had 100 million under management. And for the last 2 years, they had just had the money in the bank. Wow. And
we'll be losing money on that one.
Well, I mean, so I think they were getting like 4%, which to me was kind of mind blowing. I was like, but and they were paying it was a multifamily office, and they were paying a management fee for that, but they were still net positive, and they're probably after fees they were making a couple of percent a year. But yeah, my reaction was like, how? What? Like, it's your job is to deploy the money, and the guy that we were talking to that ran it was saying, no, look, 100% the goal is not losing money. So they would rather be only making 1%, but know it's 100% safe, than potentially having downside risk. And yeah, it's interesting. Like part of getting good at this game is understanding all the other games that are being played and the rules that they're playing them by. So
I guess that's interesting though, because I mean the whole diversification and strategy of managing money for most of us is we assume that we're going to have some wins and we're going to have some losses, and we try and make sure that the wins are bigger than the losses. And you would have thought that at that level they would be doing the same sort of thing. Do you know what I mean?
So I think probably in this case, so this was a multifamily office. There were 10 families with a total of 100 million under management. My guess is that they each had money deployed in other things as well. So they probably had real estate, they probably had stocks and bonds. And this was, they put into this fund initially, I think, for a particular sort of mandate. And then that mandate hadn't been working out. And so they'd moved to cash. But yeah, it was still a complete shock to me that would be a strategy for 100 million is to put it in the bank. So I still have a bit to learn about the way things operate. So tell me about, so you're sitting on when did you join the board that you've been on for, was that a few
I
months now?
joined Oreyeon board,
Right.
and I think it was last December. We sort of had the initial interviews and discussions, and I think it was announced the last working day of the last year, something like that.
Nice.
So yeah, it'd be about 7 odd months. And that's an interesting company. They're in the airport, and in particular the what do you call it now? Detecting foreign object detection on runways. So that
Like bird
basically,
strike
I don't know.
and stuff, or
No, not bird strike. So in this case, if you think about the Concorde and the flight of the last Concorde,
uh-huh.
the last Concorde, one of the reasons why it actually was no longer flying was it
Excellent.
actually hit some foreign objects on the runway,
Mm,
probably a bit of rubber of a tire or something like that, or possibly a bolt or something that
mm,
came up and made significant damage to the aircraft.
mm.
And that's a common problem. Not uncommon for aircraft to be losing the odd bolt or a bit of rubber or a bit of
Screws, right.
tire or whatever it might be.
Fills me with
And
confidence.
yeah, that's right. You and I both. I think sort of think about the number of miles I've had and the number of non-events I've had. I'm thinking,
Yeah.
uh, probability-wise, do I need to start worrying?
Yeah.
Anyway, they they were saying that it's a big problem for lots of airports around the world. In fact, most, both military airports as well as commercial airports.
Mm.
So they've been in the process of deploying some systems at some key airports that enable them to detect these foreign objects and hopefully get them dealt with before they impact an aircraft.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting.
Um,
So how
and
many
as
people are on the board of that?
the current board, oh,
Just roughly.
I
Is it what, four or
think
five or?
there's 5 from
Uh-huh.
memory, plus the founders.
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to remember.
Well, that's okay.
Anyway, um, and yeah, so they also have, but so they have both a hardware system and some software systems.
Uh-huh.
One of the things that's interesting and unique about their product is that it's not classified as infrastructure, so it's a little bit more portable and less difficult to implement for
Right.
trials and things like that.
So where do you think so when they offered you the role, I mean obviously with your tech background, where do you think that you're adding the most value in terms of the questions that you're asking and what they're
I
looking
think
for?
some of it is about actually doing I think there's a few key things. The first one I would say is in terms of the accountability and
Mm.
working through that with them. The other one would be in terms of, you know, that filter of is what you're doing making sense? Is what you're doing have you got the right processes in place? Are you, your market fit into and the products, do they help
Yeah.
the right solve the right problems, and working through some of that with them. And I think for me, that's probably one of my key areas and strengths in terms of that. Have they got the right product? Have they got a good strategy?
So I
How are
think
they?
it comes back to what we're touching on with ESG, and I think all businesses are guilty of this. Even small businesses is getting caught up with maybe the technology or the process around it, and sometimes losing sight of the original problem that they were solving for the client, or more importantly, what the client will actually pay for. It might be a really interesting problem, but if the client doesn't view it as such enough to pay, then are you working on the right things? And I think that is where the right questions from the right advisors, the right board members can be so valuable in terms of stripping back all of the, okay, let's just go back to the fundamentals here of what that's doing. So yeah, it sounds good.
Yeah, so it's been interesting. And we've got a range of skills on the board. So, we've got somebody who's very heavily into AI. We've got some people in finance. We've got some people that have come from more of a managerial and leader type environment. And we've also got some really good technical people. So, and I was just looking, I think it's 4 of us from the Veblen, and then the remainder are from outside Veblen, including the 2 founders. One of the biggest challenges I think we're finding at the moment is they're situated in Beirut. So let's just say that it's not always
Comes with its
easy
own
to get a
challenges.
connection or stable.
Yeah.
And also from the point of view of the board is spread literally around the world. So we have a board member in the US, and I can't remember what the Central East Coast or something like that. And then we have myself and time zones. Yes, so finding a decent time zone for everybody.
So look, I think that's definitely a universal problem. I think that there are so many advantages to being able to look globally for talent, but it comes at a price, and the price is often somebody has to get up at uncomfortable o'clock or stay up late for those meetings. I think so. I've got a friend actually in aviation in Lebanon, and I was having a discussion with him about some of the challenges that he's had over the years, like with it's hard enough being an entrepreneur, but put it in like a very unstable environment. And we were having this conversation, and there was somebody in another friend of ours that had built up a big business in Turkey, and at the time the Turkish lira had just dropped 70%, and against the dollar, and I was just like, yeah, it made me so grateful for being in, like, most of the stuff that I do is in fairly stable economies, and it's still not an easy job building these businesses, but you throw in wars and unstable currencies and corrupt politicians, and crikey, it's it can be a real challenge. But yeah, part of sitting on these boards is being able to learn some of these things and hopefully help them out.
For sure. And look, I'm not, it's not something that's foreign or unusual to me, particularly when I was worldwide product manager. I'd be looking, typically I'd have meetings in the morning with the US and in the evening with Europe. And that was something that I often do, but also some of my other roles. I typically have 3 or 4 teams around the world. So I had one project where I had hardware being developed in China, I had software being developed in India, and then we had the sales and marketing and systems work being done in the country I was in. And, so it's not an unusual thing. It's just, I guess, this is that little bit more challenging in that I think of the 4 people, we've got more than 4 different countries and more than 4 different time zones. And just finding the right balance, because I think particularly with the one in Beirut, because you've got the one in the US, you've got some in Europe, and then you've got Beirut, and then me in Australia. So it's certainly been challenging, let's say.
Yeah, I think, I mean, there are ways around it. I know, so our mutual friend Nam, with his F&B business, he basically decided that rather than try and get everyone together sort of at a regular meeting, he would just do one-on-ones with his advisors. So I think there are sort of, and look, you miss out on some of the discussion and the learning, but maybe get a couple of hours extra sleep. So it's swings and roundabouts, I think.
I think that's one of the things that they have been doing so far. They've actually had,
Right.
so the initial meeting, for example, was just me, and then they had most of the others on another call. But more recently, there's been more, I think, individual meetings than even that. So, but I don't think that's necessarily working so well, because I don't know that we have that. I think having us all at least on a irregular basis in a meeting, or having
Mm.
better communication, helps, because you're all on the same page. There's less overlap and we're all focused.
Yeah.
Whereas I think at the moment there's that little bit of pulling in maybe slight different directions, or treading on each other's toes, or whatever you might like to call it.
Yeah, it does. It takes a while. I think also kind of having a WhatsApp group with you all in that you can try and get some of the discussion done, or hey, could everybody have a think about this and look into this and then come back with your ideas? That's quite a good way of uh, when you can do some of the information in an asynchronous way rather than
Mm-hmm.
having to have people on.
Yep.
That's quite useful. But yeah, it's definitely there are some challenges for sure. Cool. And look, just want to wrap up because we're kind of getting to the top of the hour.
Yep.
In terms of some of the, because I know you've been fairly active and you've met kind of a bunch of people. Who are some of the people that have sort of stood out for you that um, just within the Veblen community? I mean, you had mentioned our expert Graham Mulligan, who's unbelievably generous with his time and knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
What about some of the other Veblen members? Have you been learning from them as well?
Certainly, I think Indira is always pretty generous with her time, and also
Mm.
with the amount of stuff that she puts up, and lots of leadership type things.
Mm.
There's, we've had some really good stuff in our accountability group. Miranda was really good with finding businesses, also with,
Mm.
working out strategies on how to approach businesses and things like that. There's been Rona has been really good,
Mm.
talking about some of the financing and some of the other opportunities. Certainly interesting talking to them at times. I think he's got a lot to add of value, but I think there's a hell of a lot of people within the group that actually have a lot of things that they can add.
Mm.
I guess there's a lot of people I've been, interacting with on LinkedIn, and I guess most of the ones I've been interacting with, like Freya's another one that I've found been quite interesting with some stuff
Yes,
lately.
some great stuff. Yeah, no, it's a good group, and I mean, you were there's some fairly high overachievers in that group you mentioned in terms of like the number. Like I think Rona's on 6 boards, and every time I see Indira, she's just accepted another board position, and I don't know when they sleep, but
Well, same here. And I sort of said, if you've got a full-time job, I don't know how you can be doing, you know, more than a few board positions. And if you're doing it as a part-time thing, or you've got flexibility in your roles, then maybe you can do more, but without
yeah.
getting paid roles, and converting them to paid roles
Mm.
at some point or depending on, I guess, where you are in your life as well. I think that's
Yeah,
one of the
yeah,
advantages that Indira has, in that, the kids are more or less off her hands. She's, over that hill.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I think for a lot of them, like yeah, they genuinely are interested in the companies and want to help,
yes.
and and I think also being so well connected now, people can help just by introducing them to one or two people in the Veblen community, and or yeah, the people that they're meeting on a day-to-day basis, just connecting businesses within their own boards together can be super helpful as well. So yeah, it's fascinating to watch. But yeah, great to hear your journey as well. That's awesome. And uh, yeah, hopefully there'll be more bionic bits and pieces and more boards in your time if you have the time for it.
I'm planning to spend more time. I mean, that's longer term. I see myself spending more time on boards.
Nice.
Certainly, I'd like to do more part-time work, I guess, and transition to more board work would be my longer term goal. But
Yeah.
in the short term, let's see what happens.
Very cool. Well, look, I really
Thank you
appreciate
very much.
No, I appreciate you taking your time. It's been great to catch up again, and I'm sure people have learned some interesting stuff. So, well, if you want to connect with Mark, just go into he should be on the LinkedIn and go and follow him on LinkedIn because he also posts some interesting content as well. And see you all around.